Hello world, I'm Sean Slattery. In this episode, we're going to continue building our home virtual lab network. In our previous episode, we built a domain controller, and in this time, we're going to add to that, adding an email server, a lightweight, free email server so we can test our various tools, and then we're going to build ourselves a Windows 10 client system. So let's get started. Okay, so what we have here is our Lab DC domain controller. I've gone ahead and logged in. And since Windows 2019 tends to ship with Internet Explorer, at least as of today, April 2023, we need to go ahead and install a more up-to-date modern web browser. So we're gonna go ahead and use Microsoft Edge at this point. You could obviously use Chrome or Firefox or whatever. I happen to have the binary for Edge already available. So first thing I'll do is install that. Okay, there we go. Now we have Microsoft Edge installed. Go ahead and launch that the first time. And it's going to give us a little welcome wizard. Don't need any of that. Thank you very much. Don't bother syncing. Leave me alone. Thank you. My one concession to customizing is setting dark mode, which is good. And a couple options inside this. Notably, I do like web browsers to open up where I left off. So I'm going to go ahead and go into settings and modify my startup shutdown to be previous session. Okay, for our free email server, I'm drawing a complete blank what it is, but that's okay. I've already got the download here. I'm gonna go ahead and start it. Mail enable. So I've started the wizard just to show you where I can get it. Mailenable.com, I believe it is. There we go. So when you're doing lab testing, anything like that, just for something very quick and easy, SMTP POP3 or IMAP server, this fits the bill. While I'm here, I'm also going to go ahead and download the Mozilla Thunderbird client. And while that downloads in the background, I will go ahead and finish the install of Mail Enable Server. And you'll see it only takes a couple of minutes. Okay, so Thunderbird is downloading. All right, so while that downloads, so let's welcome to the setup of Mail Enable. Now this is a completely generic factory install of Windows 2019 with the domain controller. So we don't need to install the webmail service. I suppose if you wanted to set up webmail, but for lab network, we're gonna use the Mozilla Thunderbird client. It's gonna work just fine. So let's go ahead and install or complete the Mail Enable installation. Defaults are generally fine. Oh, it does want a company, so let's do lab. There we go. Name, administrator, and lab. Next, finish. I'm just going to install all the defaults. Lab local, I'll go ahead and put my standard password in. Now do notice it picked up the local DNS name. I did skip through that, but I'm used to using this. Because we chose lab.local as a domain name, we're keeping everything local. That way we reduce the risk of something getting out. You send something out, it's not going to get routed or attempt to be routed on the internet. So it keeps it truly local to this lab network. Accepting the defaults is fine. Okay, mail server is installed. Don't need to go to the website. Let's go ahead and open up Mail Enable. And first thing we need to do is go ahead and create our admin mailbox. Post office, lab.local, mailbox, new mailbox, admin at admin. I'm just a user, that's cool. So there we go, admin is created. I can go ahead and launch Thunderbird. Where are we? There it is. And incidentally, if you're ever looking for a good alternative to Microsoft Outlook for pure email, I actually use Thunderbird in day-to-day administration usage as well. With a couple add-ons, it makes it a very useful, practical email client. So next, finish. As you can see, it goes really quickly. And on first launch, it's going to launch the wizard, auto discover our setup. So admin at lab.local. It's going to search the network, query DNS, and if all goes well, there we go, next. It's detected everything. Now it is going to complain about encryption. We don't care. Again, this is just a lab network. We're just doing this so we can enable functionality via the email clients alerts that we're going to play with and evaluate in the lab. So done. I understand the risks. Again, just confirming no encryption. And there we go. We can already see a new message has come in, the welcome from Mail Enable. I'm going to go ahead and send a test message. So write to admin@lab.local. Oops. Hello, world. It's good to see you. Finally. Click send. And our message has already come through. So there we go. Fully functional email server in under, what was that, 5 minutes or so. Lots of fun configuration. You can think things you can do inside Thunderbird, but for the purposes of just having an email, very lightweight for testing lab, we're good to go. Kick off the next one where we set up Windows 10. All right, let's go ahead and build ourselves that Windows 10 client system. Pick up literally where we left off. I'm going to start a new toolbox, application setting, create a new system. I'm going to call it Lab PC. Very creative, I know. So Windows 10 64-bit. You have 8 gigs of memory, which is fine for workstation, at least getting started here. Accept the defaults. Now, before I start that, I do want to modify the settings and make sure I'm in the right network. So previously I had set up LabDC. I made a mistake. So actually learning point here. So let's go into LabDC, make sure that I'm in the right network. So I want to change it to NAT network, and notice I'm now in NAT network. Now, the nice thing is, since the network settings were effectively the same range that is, almost the same. Gateway. There we go. So that was a mistake I made when I was setting up that first, the LabDC, is the IP range was all good, but when you're in the private NAT mode, your default gateway with VirtualBox is 2.2. I needed to make sure I switched explicitly to the NAT network, which I did just now. And the NAT network has a default gateway of 2.1. So I would have been turning on in circles, trying to figure out why I didn't have network connectivity between the hosts. That's why I forgot to switch to explicitly apply the NAT network. So I'm doing that now with LabPC. Again, by default, VirtualBox puts everything in the private NAT. I want to make sure under network, we go in here and choose the NAT network, and we're choosing our NAT network. No space. So now I can install, it will be part of the same logical subnet now. So let's go and click start. I'm going to choose my Windows 10 ISO, which I've already downloaded here. I created that using the Windows Media Creator tool. You download off the Microsoft website. It'll just create an ISO of whatever version you're running. I'm running Windows 10 22H2 at the moment. So let's go and choose that and start it up. The process is going to look very similar to what we did for Windows Server. Okay, again, using keyboard input. There's no virtual client tools installed yet, so the interface, the switch between the interfaces is gonna be a little clunky. So I'm gonna use keyboard and leave my focus inside the guest at the moment. So Alt N for next, I for install. I don't have a product key. That's I again, I think it is. I'm gonna choose Windows 10 Pro, N for next. I to accept, N for next. C for custom, next to install on the hard drive. That's there, and now off we go. So this all is going to take a certain amount of time, and I'll get back to you when it reaches a point where there's some input required. Okay, we're finally at the point where Windows 10 is asking for some input. Accept US keyboard, that's fine. Obviously choose whatever keyboard input you like. I'm always on US keyboards. Okay, US keyboard layout, yes. I'm not going to add another keyboard layout. This process looks very similar to a previous video about building a small virtual system for home networks. Basically the same process, except this is Windows 10 Pro, which will be used to join a domain. That's one of the key differences between the home versions of Windows 10. I believe 11 has roughly the same constraints. 10 cannot, or home cannot join a domain. You need at least Pro in order to join a domain. Okay, we're going to go ahead and set up personal use initially. We just want to get the system installed or deployed so that we can update the virtual tools and then join the domain. We don't need all that Microsoft Online account or any of that stuff. It's not necessary at this stage or for this use case. Okay, so we're just going to do an offline account, and we can go ahead and do a limited experience. We don't need the full range of Microsoft apps. So we'll go ahead and choose the local user of this PC. I'm going to be cheeky and use root. That is just the default administrator or default user and administrator account. And since this is just a lab, these security questions, I just use something really short and easy to type. The color red. So that's what I use for all my security questions for a lab environment only. Wouldn't obviously put this into production. Okay, don't need any of these options turned on for a lab environment. So we're just going to turn everything off, keep it simple. Skipping customizing experience again, don't need any of this stuff. I actually wish Microsoft, and maybe they do have one that I'm not aware of, but since I don't do much in desktop management these days, but the ability to just turn off all this other stuff, this fluff that gets installed by default with Windows 10 and 11, it's just not necessary. In fact, if you go through hardening exercises following the CIS controls, for example, one of the things that's checked off in the early stages is disabling all those Xbox superfluous services that get apps that get installed by default with Windows 10 and 11. Don't need Cortana, thank you very much. Great. Slowly getting through this. So we'll catch back up when we reach another point of input. Okay, we got Windows finally installed. First thing we want to do, install the guest additions. Okay, next, finish. Finally rebooting. Finally, okay, let's log in. We're going to set our IP address, computer name, reboot, and then join the domain. Okay, so first thing, let's go ahead and set our IP address. Alright, so the IP address, actually let's bring up a command prompt while we're at it. Alright, finally command prompt's up. And I should be able to ping, if I did all my settings correctly earlier, I should be able to ping 10.02.101, and it's pinging. So that's good. So I am definitely on the same network as the domain controller. So let's go ahead and set our IP address. And we are going to, oh, there we are. I already had it open. So we're going to do 10.0.0. I like to put servers on the 100, clients on the 200 range. So we're going to do 10.0.2.201, first PC, 255.255.255, gateway of 10.0.2.1, and the DNS server this time 10.0.2.101, the domain controller. Okay, so at this point I should be able to rename my computer, then I'm going to join the domain. And the little network connectivity icon shows I don't have internet access, but let's test that real quick. Make sure I can still access the internet. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and start the wizard to rename the computer. So that works. So the name resolution is working. I should be able to ping google.com, for example. Should be able to. I say that confidently. Yep, it's just taking a couple seconds. And while I'm here, Let's go ahead and set my screen resolution to something a bit more user-friendly. Okay, let's go into the full default resolution so I can go nearly full screen. There we go. That's feeling a lot nicer. Open that by mistake. Let's go back to joining the domain. So right-click Computer Properties. And Advanced System Settings. Computer name, change lab PC. Reboot one more time. We'll join the domain, reboot one more time after joining the domain, and then verify we can log in as a domain user, in this case the domain admin account. And we'll also double check that the GPO that we made for disabling the firewall has come into effect. Okay, so now we're going to log back in and join the domain. All right, same procedure as before. Now that we're logged in, right-click the computer icon, Properties. All right, Advanced System Settings. Computer, change domain lab.local. Lab.local, oh, different password. That'll do the trick. There we go, join the domain. Okay, reboot. And while it reboots, I'm going to switch back over to the domain controller. And recall earlier that we had created OUs, or organizational units, for the different systems. So I'm going to go back into AD users and computers and make sure that I have the computer object. There it is, lab PC. I'm going to go ahead and move that to domain workstations. Actually, usually my convention, I realized I did that a little differently. I'm just going to call this domain computers, which is my historical convention. There we go. That way, domain computers has any client systems. And while that comes back, I'm going to let that boot, and we'll just check our policies. Okay, let's log back in here after that reboot. Oops, wrong account. I should have logged in as the domain user. Let's do that. Try this again. So now, instead of logging as local root, I'm going to log in as a domain account of admin, do a GP update force, check my firewall policy, and that should be good. All right, let's try this again. Other user. And there we have it, logging in as a system admin account in the domain. So obviously the domain join did work. Give that a minute while it builds our profile, and then we'll check the firewall and policies. Okay, we are logged in as the admin. Let's check our policies. Oh, actually, let's check. You know what? It should have applied anyway, but we can see we're in lab local. That's cool. But if we log in here, we should see, or go to the network settings. We don't necessarily have to do a GP update, but I have faith that this is working. Waiting for it to take its sweet time. Finally, Windows sure taking its time building that profile. You know what, I'll do it the other way. All right, so let's go into network properties. Firewall. And there we go, domain firewall is currently off, so there you have it. So that's it. What we achieved now, first part of this video, we built a domain controller, made sure it's in the NAT network so we could share network settings, network communication, set our settings, and then we built a Windows 10 client system, set the IP address manually, join the network, prove that the policies work, and there you have it. Now from this, we can build additional member servers, which we will do in future videos around certain applications, but that's the basis for a typical corporate network, domain controller, client systems. So that's it. You're off and running, and with that, that's the nice foundation, whether it be learning, testing, tweaking, playing with policies, and all the rest. Hope you enjoyed that, and we'll see you in the next video. the latest and greatest. Who needs Xbox in a corporate environment anyway? Well, maybe for a game room, but not on your everyday computer. Or break room, I should say. I suppose if you're lucky enough to have a game and a break room, that's cool. Generally speaking, we don't need those on your typical office worker type environment. Sometimes I do miss the days of DOS and NetWare, where I could literally boot from floppy disk format and apply the DOS files to the boot system to the hard drive, load the network, copy the entire thing down, and reboot, and it would log in and have network access. Back in my network management days, that would be enough to have a fully managed Windows 3.1 environment. Literally copy files, you were in and out and done in 15, 20 minutes. The good old days, I guess.